Usual. Let's see who's over here. All right, our chat window is taking a bit to refresh, and let me start by asking you who heard about the first NFL game in Brazil, the first NFL game ever in Brazil, actually in South America, and that happened in São Paulo in a particular arena from Corinthians. Corinthians is a major soccer team in Brazil, and Corinthians has provided the arena so both U.S. teams could play. And the teams are the Green Bay Packers, and let me check on the other one, the Eagles, right? I think it's Philadelphia Eagles, if I'm not mistaken. So these are the two teams who played in São Paulo at the Corinthians Arena. And just like everything else in Brazil, there is never something boring, and therefore this game was full of interesting points, right? I'm going to touch bases on just a couple of them. The first one was a request by the game organization in Brazil for the Eagles and the Packers not to wear green, which of course, for the Green Packers, that would be naturally a weird request. And the reason for that, was, to avoid confrontation, because the Corinthians team, who were providing the arena, is like a major opponent of Palmeiras. Palmeiras is another Brazilian team that wears green all the time, right? So the idea here is do not wear green to avoid aggravation. And that was very curious. I don't think, like any Brazilian person would kind of think that just because the NFL teams were wearing green, that should cause an aggravation. But there was one of the requests from the Brazilian organization. And another topic that also caused a lot of discussion, a lot of headlines. It was the safety, of players and team members and whoever was attending the games, right? Like there was a very clear message to the NFL team players, to avoid going out because crime rate in Brazil is crazy. Okay, there were actually the words from a player. Let me see if I recall the name. Darius Slay, and he said, "I don't even want to invite my family because I think that Brazil is too dangerous." Right now, interesting enough, like after the game, there was a lot of sharing, by whoever attended the game, saying that they didn't see any problems at all, that they actually, were feeling very safe in Brazil, and they think that the media is just like, replicating something that is said over time, that Brazil is too dangerous. But there you go. That was the first NFL game. I see here some participations already. Many Moon Acres. Hello, Luciano. Hello, everyone. Welcome back, Many Moon Acres. The 552. Yeah, I did. I heard the quarterback for the Packers got injured. There you go. Yeah, so we have other people here in our live stream who saw the game or heard about the game. Yes, and that was in São Paulo, Brazil, and that was in a major arena. Another interesting point, fans have blasted NFL over the field conditions in Brazil as Packers Eagles sleep all over turf. Okay, so I'm not really good at the NFL games. I don't know if the turf was that bad, but that's another thing that has been discussed. And then finally, like the last point is the absence of X. So I know that some of you know about this fact. I believe some of you even mentioned, like in our last live stream, X, as we speak, is not allowed in Brazil. It has been banned by the STF, which is the highest court in Brazil, kind of just like the Supreme Court in the United States. And there has been a dispute almost on a personal level between Elon Musk and a major justice in the Brazilian Supreme Court called Alexandre de Moraes. All right, so there has been a nasty dispute between those two gentlemen, and the result is that now X is banned in Brazil. And not only that, but if someone uses, and that's overboard, as I'm sure you can tell, if someone is going to use a VPN in Brazil to overcome the prohibition of using X, you're going to be fined, I think, 50,000 Brazilian reais, which is going to be roughly 90,000 US dollars, right? And of course, this would be easier for the Brazilian legal system to find someone who's based in Brazil. If you are, for instance, a fan of the NFL and if you attended the game and you had to use a VPN to overcome X prohibition, so you could, post your messages and you go back to the US, there is not much that the Brazilian court system would do, to chase you. But that's how things are in Brazil. And there you go. These were the highlights of the first NFL game in Brazil. I see William Frost. Welcome, William Frost. Welcome back. William says, hi, Luciano. I heard about the game. We have had NFL games in London, but I didn't know it was popular in Brazil. William, yes, I know NFL, they do have games abroad every now and then, but they are not popular in Brazil at all, okay? Not popular at all. And so the reason why there was an NFL game in Brazil, I think it is exactly to try to develop some level of awareness in Brazil and Latin America about, like the football games, right? Like, football in Brazil. And interesting for those of you who know, some level of spoken Portuguese. In Brazil, we don't call soccer, of course. We call futebol, which is super close to football, right? And the concept is like if we play by kicking the ball, the right name should be football and not a soccer, all right? So in Brazil, we don't even have a name for the NFL games, but the closest we can get in terms of explaining the name, it would be like the American football, right? So soccer for us is like football, and the football from the United States we're gonna call the American football, all right? But there you go. They are not popular at all, William, and that's, I think, the point that made it attractive for the NFL to have a game in Brazil, because at the same time, like American football is not popular in Brazil, but Brazilians, they are pretty fast to assimilate new trends, new costumes. So I would say that if NFL games were more common in Brazil, in a very short period of time, there would be people like following the NFL games and maybe even developing American football leagues in Brazil, for the matter, right? And I do believe in that, because I do know how fast Brazilians are in terms of learning new cultures or new, costumes, and incorporating those costumes in our culture. Okay, so I think that was the whole idea of having an NFL game in Brazil. Now, let me ask you: did any of you know about the prohibition of using X in Brazil? I'm just curious, like, how is this matter being shared abroad? And it is so interesting, like one of the hallmarks of this dispute, again, between Elon Musk and Alexandre de Moraes, which is like the main justice, I would say, nowadays in the Brazilian Supreme Court. It was the prohibition of X to operate in Brazil, but listen and see if you can believe. The prohibition was advertised on X. Okay, so on X, the Brazilian Supreme Court said X can no longer operate in Brazil. And by the way, I'm using X to say so. All right. So I don't know if it was almost like a provocation, or if it was, as a matter of fact, information, because X is still, or was at that point, the major outlet for news in Brazil, just like probably pretty much everywhere else. Okay. All right, let's see. William Frost, I don't even know the rules of American football. I know it evolved from rugby originally. Yeah, that's a good point, William. So, rugby, it's a version of the American football. And very interesting, there is, in Sao Paulo, there is a public university, which is the Universidade de São Paulo, or São Paulo University. And I know about that because that's where I went for my college degrees, for two of my college degrees. And I remember when I was studying in my 20s at Universidade de São Paulo, the engineering college within the Universidade of São Paulo, they did have a rugby team, and it wasn't like American football. It was rugby, and it was a major sport just within University of São Paulo, but not beyond University of São Paulo. It was something super unusual, right? Because again, it was a major sport within the university. But if you ask any kids or any teenagers or any youngsters in Brazil about American football or rugby, I guarantee they could not tell you a couple of rules. Okay, they don't have any idea about how the sport is played. But I do remember about rugby from my college years, just because it was practiced in this particular college that I attended. Okay, and Minimum Acres is sharing. Yes, I heard about X. The next day it happened. Yes. Very interesting dispute. It was a very intense dispute between Elon Musk and this justice from the Brazilian Supreme Court, and it was risking also affecting Starlink, right? Is it Starlink? I think it's Starlink, the other company from Elon Musk. Starlink has been very important in Brazil, just like it has been everywhere else, because Brazil has continental dimensions, right? Continental dimensions. So if you are in certain areas of Brazil, particularly in the north of Brazil, right? Like you have the Amazon and you have the Northeast. If you are in these areas, like most of the geographic locations are not covered by traditional internet. So Starlink came to fulfill a huge gap. And I know that, like during the heat, during the dispute between Elon Musk and the Brazilian Supreme Court, the Brazilian military said, listen, please just don't touch Starlink, because we do need Starlink, right? Like, as you can see in the Ukraine and Russia war. Starlink has been a key for Ukraine to communicate, and then Brazil also relies heavily on Starlink for internet, particularly in those locations where you cannot get traditional internet, right? So hopefully this dispute is not going to affect Starlink, because if it does, it's going to be a huge loss for Brazil, not for Starlink or for Elon Musk. It's going to be a huge loss for Brazil. So let's hope that this doesn't happen. All right. Okay. Let's see who else we have over here. Yes, Sweden is commenting, it's an interesting topic. It's bad for me as I had loads of contacts on X in Brazil and I'm not on Instagram, so I have lost loads of contacts, unfortunately. I'm thinking of joining Instagram now. Yes, Sweden, that's very unfortunate. And X, just like the other platforms, they also represent a source of income to many content producers. Okay, so despite the technicalities of why X was was banned from Brazil, the point is that a lot of people are losing income because of the prohibition of using X. Minimum Acres says, I think people on this channel probably look for Brazilian news, so maybe we are not good representatives of the population abroad in general. That's true. That's true, Minimum. Many people over here, they have a very specific understanding of Brazil because of the interest. That's an interesting point. Kia is saying, I believe bad law make lawlessness. All right, that's Kia's point on the dispute. Thank you for sharing, Kia. Minimum Acres. Minimum Acres has a question now about the Viper. For the Viper visa, how is urban property defined? Is there a minimum population for the city? Do small towns count as urban? Some other considerations we should know. Minimum, that's a common question, right? Like when people are trying to find a property to buy and then to qualify for the real estate investment visa. For those of you who don't know, that's the Viper we're talking about. That's the real estate investment visa. And whenever you are trying to find a property, you need to avoid the rural properties, because rural properties, they are not going to qualify for the Viper. And so a minimum is concerned because, of course, there is this need for buying an urban property. But how is urban property defined? In our experience, minimum, this is going to be defined by the type of tax that you pay. Because in Brazil, if you have an urban property, you're going to pay a tax, a yearly tax called IPTU, all right? And the U in IPTU actually means urban. Okay, so if the property is paying IPTU, it means 100% that this property is urban. And then you don't need to worry about the size of the city, like if this thing is in the middle of a jungle or not. As long as the property pays IPTU, you know that the property is urban. Now, if the property does not pay IPTU taxes, most probably than not, the property is going to be paying ITR, and the R stands for rural, right? And then that's how usually you're going to know if the property is either urban or rural. And of course, you need to ask for this paperwork from the prospective seller, right? Like you need to say, listen, what type of taxes are you paying? And if they say this type of the other type, it doesn't hurt to ask for a copy of the tax documents, because then you can see by yourself, or even better, if you have an attorney advising you on the acquisition, so the attorney can look at the paperwork and make sure that the seller is actually paying correctly the type of taxes that they are telling you so. All right, Minimum, I hope that was helpful. All right. William Frost, has anyone been fined for using a VPN connection and posting on X in Brazil yet? William, not that I know, okay, not that I know. I haven't heard about such news. Now, I know that the Brazilian Bar Association, meaning, the Association of Attorneys in Brazil, they were going to fight because, like, they think this measure was extreme and it is not supported by Brazilian law. Okay, so you can tell the internet service providers to stop broadcasting and allowing access to X. But if you do take a step to go after the VPN providers, it means like an overreach. So the Brazilian Bar Association is actually fighting this measure, and I would say I don't think the Brazilian Supreme Court is going to go after people using a VPN, particularly because it's difficult, right? Like the whole purpose of the VPN is to avoid other parties knowing that you are accessing a certain type of material, right? So within this concept, the Brazilian Supreme Court, they were even telling, and see how far this goes, telling Apple and Google to remove the VPN apps out of their stores. But once they saw that it was clearly an overreach, they actually revoked the request and said, you know what, you can keep the VPN apps, because I think, like you would look really bad, right? Like, I mean, reflecting again, an overreach, because one thing it would be like to prohibit like access to X. Another thing would be to even chase the VPNs, as a preventive measure to avoid people accessing X. So, like the VPN matter is still in the works, but my hope is that this thing doesn't go that far. Alright, Minimum Acres, muito obrigada pela explicação sobre IPTU. You're pretty welcome, Minimum. Let us know if you have other questions. Epic Laughs Crew, welcome, Epic. I think it's your first time here. You're pretty welcome. Epic Laugh is asking, what are the refinance options in Brazil if I pay cash? Right, so Epic Laugh, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think you want to buy on a cash basis to qualify for the Viper, because if you buy with finance, you do not qualify for the Viper. So yes, you must buy on a cash basis to be able to secure the Viper. But once you bought, what if I refinance? So refinance is... I'm not sure if you're saying like the reverse mortgage, in which you have like a fully paid property and then you can get a mortgage. But the refinance, let's say traditionally, if you are holding a mortgage in Brazil, this thing is starting to become more common now. In the United States, people would refinance all the time, right? Like even like a few years ago under a very attractive rate. So people would refinance to get a lower rate, and that would be pretty helpful. So Brazil only now is starting to have this thing of refinance, but it's becoming more common by the day, I would say. The main options that I see for finance in general and refinance for the matter are going to be the Banco Caixa. Okay, so I'm going to just write down over here some options to consider for either finance or refinance, right? So Caixa mostly for Brazilians, okay? And then for foreign citizens, maybe, okay, because you can never tell for sure that they are going to be able to accommodate your transaction. But I'm going to say maybe Banco Inter and Santander. All right. So there you go. I just wrote here in the chat window. These are some of the banks that you can consider. Banco Caixa, usually, traditionally, they have the lowest rates possible because they are co-owned by the Brazilian federal government, so they don't need, they don't have the same need for profits as other banks. Banco Inter, they have been trying for a few years to enter the foreign citizen segment, and Santander, it's an international bank. By origin, right? Like Santander came from Europe. They are very active in different markets. So they do have like a toolbox that is going to allow for the bank to consider finance to foreign citizens. Okay, most of the banks in Brazil, they are not really equipped to handle finance for foreign citizens. They are unable to verify your income. They don't know or they don't have access to your credit score abroad. So usually they are just going to, deny a mortgage right off the bat. They are not going to even discuss. These other two banks, like they are examples of banks that are trying to work with the foreign citizen segment in Brazil. All right, I have Moses here. How much does it generate monthly? Moses, not sure if I follow. There is a message deleted prior to this one. So if you want to provide context, I will be happy to answer, Moses. Just let me know the context of this. I would guess maybe income or interest that is being generated monthly. All right, Moses. All right, Colt Anderson. Hello, Miss Oliveira. How difficult it is to get a driver license in Brazil in your experience? Colt, so the first thing, and welcome to the channel, Colt. So the first thing to consider is that you're gonna need the RNM card. The RNM card is the Brazilian ID for foreign citizens legally residing in Brazil. Okay, we do have some people who contact us. Well, how can I get an RNM card? Where do I apply for one? And the RNM card is actually not something that you're going to apply for the sake of getting the card. The RNM card is going to be actually the outcome of an immigration procedure in Brazil. Let me give you an example. You apply for the retirement visa. You apply for the digital nomad visa. You apply for the Viper, right? Once you secure your residency in Brazil, once you have a positive reply, once you have an approval of your process, you're going to be allowed, but not only allowed, you're actually going to be required to register, to attend an appointment with the Brazilian Federal Police. And then at this appointment, if you take all the correct paperwork, they are going to issue an RNM number on the spot. The RNM number, and I'm going to write over here, RNM means Registro Nacional do Migrante, right? Meaning that you're going to get your number as a foreign citizen residing in Brazil. Once you have this number, this number is going to allow you to apply for the driver license, right? But not only this number, but you're also going to need, for instance, your original driver license, which should be valid at the time of application for the Brazilian one, and about another dozen documents that you're going to need to provide, and everything will need to come with an apostille and so on. So I would say it is feasible, it is doable, but probably just like everything else in Brazil, there is a certain amount of red tape and bureaucracy for you to overcome. All right, Colt, but absolutely doable. And again, as long as you have the RNM card and the other requirements such as a valid driver license, you have like an official address for your residence in Brazil, and so on. Daniel Smith, boa tarde, Daniel. Welcome to the channel. William, Luciano, what is your opinion on the banning of X in Brazil? Do you think it will be permanent? William, that's a good question, right? Like for how long will it last? And if it was, what do I think about the banning, right? Like so, let's say the latest decision on the banning, it was legally supported, right? Because it happened because the Brazilian Supreme Court told Elon Musk, you either have a legal representative in the country or you cannot operate in the country. And that's valid not only for X, but for pretty much any company, right? And that's something that's not usual to mandate a company to have a legal representative in the country. I mean, for other countries, but for Brazil, that's true across the board. So when the Brazilian Supreme Court said you gotta have a legal representative or you are not allowed to operate in Brazil, thumbs up, the decision is correct, okay? Now, the problem is like when you review the prior history between X, Elon Musk, and the Brazilian Supreme Court, because the reason why the Brazilian Supreme Court told X to have a legal representative is because Elon Musk basically fired everyone in Brazil because every single employee of X was being threatened with jail time, right? Because and then we come to the real issue, in my opinion, right? Like the real issue, it was that the Brazilian Supreme Court was consistently targeting outlets like news outlets and people from the right. Okay, so it's like there is a whole discussion in Brazil, and for that matter, I think across the world in terms of fake news. So the Brazilian Supreme Court was targeting, like fake news, and people could tell that the Supreme Court was targeting mostly people from the right. So at a certain point, Elon Musk said, listen, this thing is not legal. This thing is like you are punishing, you are curtailing like the freedom of expression. And I'm not going to agree to that. I understand that the orders are coming from the Supreme Court, but I'm basically not going to follow your orders, right? So that was several months ago. And then the Supreme Court said, oh, all right, so if you're not going to follow, I'm going to issue fines, until, you either follow my orders or you go out of business. And then, of course, X said, well, I cannot pay, like, you're sending hundreds of requests to cancel or to block accounts from mostly people from the right. And therefore, I'm going to, instead of making myself reachable by your fines, I'm going to basically shut down my office. And I'm going to let go of my people so you don't target my people, right? Because it's very common, like for a company in Brazil, if the company is not following the orders from a court, and not just like the Supreme Court or any court for the matter, for the court to threaten this person with jail. So the person is going to comply with the order, right? But then Elon Musk said, you know what? So let's just let everybody go. I'm going to shut down my office and I'm still going to keep X online, and there we go, right? So that was the origin of the dispute. It was Elon Musk's understanding that the Brazilian Supreme Court was targeting people from the right, okay? And in all fairness, I believe that was the case, okay? I believe the Brazilian Supreme Court was actually targeting people from the right. And not only that, we have something that was not common a few years ago. I would say 5 years ago, you would never see that, or it would be extremely rare, which was for the Brazilian Supreme Court to actually go after people, right? Because if you think like the Supreme Court should be reactive, I think about the United States Supreme Court. You're never going to see a justice from the Supreme Court to say, well, that thing is wrong. I'm going to, I don't know, issue a court order, or I'm going to, like usually they are 100% reactive, and someone is going to file certain claim or certain lawsuit and ask the Supreme Court to evaluate the request. Right, that's the traditional route for pretty much every single highest court worldwide. But nowadays in Brazil, again, the Brazilian Supreme Court, they are going out of their way to do things that they think as correct. Okay, so I think, in my opinion, this is the biggest problem. It is that the Brazilian Supreme Court is no longer reactive. Like, they are actually active. They are actively pursuing things that they believe it to be right. Okay, so again, this latest decision from the Brazilian Supreme Court, it was actually aligned with what the Brazilian legal system says. You either have a legal representative or you cannot operate in Brazil. Okay, so that was the correct decision. However, X got to this point because of this whole history of, I don't know, 1 or 2 years of, let's say, this activeness from the Brazilian Supreme Court in chasing, like, producers of fake news that happens to target mostly the right side of the political spectrum, right? So this is not exactly like an opinion. I am more or less describing the dynamics behind what's going on. All right. I hope that helps. I hope that explains a little bit about the dispute. All right. I see Many Moon. Can properties with a commercial component, like a B&B or with a business downstairs and an apartment upstairs, costing over 1 million reais, qualify for the Viper, or is a commercial property not allowed? So, Many Moon, actually, whenever you buy the property, if there are multiple components, usually the seller is going to want to have an itemization or an itemization of the components, because when the seller is selling real estate, they are actually gonna pay more taxes on the real estate part, because usually they are gonna have a profit and they are gonna need to pay 15% over this profit. Okay, and if they say, well, I'm just selling 400,000 in real estate, and the 600,000 is actually a business, they are not gonna need to pay the 15% over the business component. In theory, right? Like, they would potentially need to pay other types of taxes, but they don't need to pay the same tax on real estate. So my concern is, like, if you're buying a property, and there is another version of this question, minimum, like, what if I buy real estate with furniture inside, right? Usually the seller is going to say, well, I'm selling for 1 million, but it's actually just 700,000 for the real estate and 300 for the furniture, and they are not going to want to pay the tax on the 300, and therefore he's going to have items in the purchase agreement describing what's what. And unfortunately, when we apply for the Viper, like, one of the components that the immigration is going to review is the purchase agreement, and they are going to be able to tell that you didn't pay 1 million for the real estate, you actually paid just 700. Right? So same reasoning applied to your question, minimum. It could be a commercial property. So if you're buying, for instance, a commercial, commercial suites, like in Rio de Janeiro, there is nothing against, like, the property being commercial. However, you need to make sure that the purchase structure is going to be clear enough so the immigration is going to understand that you're buying for 1 million reais just the real estate, and whatever is coming along is going to be on top of the 1 million reais and not within the 1 million reais. Okay? All right, Many Moon, thank you so much. Many Moon says, and I will ask you to please like and subscribe. Please like our content. We have just 5 likes as of now, so I would really appreciate if you could like our content, so this content is going to reach more people, not only right now while we are in the live stream, but also later on after this content becomes a video that could be searched in YouTube. I really appreciate those of you who are liking the live stream, and that's really appreciated. Thank you so much, Many Moon. Colt Anderson, thank you for the response. You're pretty welcome, Colt. Keep the participation going. I see here Moses Travels. Thank you for another opportunity to learn more about immigration to Brazil. You're pretty welcome, Moses. Good to see you over here. Moses has a question. I want to buy a studio in Moema or Jardim São Paulo and use it for short-term rentals, but I would like to ask you a few questions. By all means, Moses, keep the participation coming. Do you have a property used for short-term rental in São Paulo? Moses, not sure if you're asking about me myself. I do, right? Not surprisingly, I do have properties that I use for short-term rentals in São Paulo. It's a pretty good business, all right? It's not like something out of this world. Maybe it was like 4, 5, or 7 years ago. Today is more like a regular business. But as you probably know, Moses, like São Paulo, it's one of the main cities in Brazil. It's the largest city, right? Like it's the #1 business city in the entire country. So not surprisingly, there is a large number of people traveling to Brazil. There is a lot of people coming from other states to study in Brazil. The best university of the entire country is in São Paulo, is, by the way, the University of São Paulo. And so you have a lot of people coming from other states to study at the Universidade of São Paulo. There is also FGV. FGV is a major university for business and law. A lot of people will come, to study over there. So São Paulo, it's like, unbeatable when you think about the number of people coming to do something, either business, either education, either, even like for tourism, right? Like, São Paulo is a beautiful city. I have so many friends who are going to tell you, Moses, that São Paulo is much better than anywhere else in Brazil. There is even a really nice video about São Paulo. It's actually an interview I had. I'm going to write over here, interview with Jerry Nardini. All right, Jerry, he did use our immigration services, and we recorded a whole video with Jerry, and he's so passionate about São Paulo, right? So the bottom line is, like, if you do short-term rentals in São Paulo, like, you're gonna have a consistent stream of income, and you can also enjoy your property. Let's say if you want to, spend a month in Brazil, then you basically remove your property, or, you remove those dates from your calendar, and then you can enjoy your property in São Paulo. And if you're not enjoying your property in São Paulo, then you can do short-term rental. There is nothing wrong with short-term rental if you're pursuing the Viper. So, pretty good idea. All right, Moses. Okay, William Frost, super interesting. Thank you for the info about the case. Absolutely, William. Moses, 2 years, what is the occupancy rate? Well, occupancy rate is going to depend, Moses, on your marketing strategy, right? Like, some people, they are going to charge less to have a as high as possible occupancy rate. So let's say if you are charging below market average, there is a good chance you're going to have something like a 90% occupancy rate. Now, if you're charging a premium, let's say if you're charging a really nice premium because you don't want to, too many people going to your property, you don't want a much, maintenance required. Maybe you could work with a rate that's going to be substantially above like the market average and have a 30 to 40 percent occupancy rate. All right, Moses. So there are different strategies that I see in the market. And I do use like for different types of properties, right? Some properties I'm gonna work with like average market, and then I'm gonna be happy with a 60 to 70% occupancy rate. Other properties I don't want people to use it that much. I'm gonna work with a substantially above the market average number, and then I'm gonna have a 30 to 40% occupancy rate. All right. Now I'm gonna share. I know that you are active in this space. I'm gonna share about a developer in São Paulo. Okay, Vitacom, and this developer, they also do the management. They also do the management for the apartments. Now I'm not. It's not vetting, right? Like I'm just telling you from the top of my head. I have not invested in this particular developer yet, so I'm gonna write just as a reference of a developer who also handles management of the short-term rentals. All right, that's for you guys to investigate. I just shared over here. Okay, again, I'm not vouching, I'm not guaranteeing you're gonna get your Viper. I'm just sharing as a resource for you to check. Vitacom, they did start this concept several years ago of selling a property, and if you buy the property from them, you have an option to also hire the property management service, including the management of the short-term rentals. Okay, Moses. So this is something for you to investigate, maybe ask about, occupancy rate and other things. But they are known in the market as a provider of, let's say, a turnkey solution for short-term rentals. All right, Moses. I hope that was helpful. Kia says thank you, and with a flower, thank you, Kia. I hope to see you often here at the live stream. How much does it generate monthly, right? So it's gonna depend on how much the property is worth, Moses, right? Like, I mean, I'm gonna tell you about a property we have here at the firm, like it's from a client. This client, she's an attorney in the United States. She has a couple of apartments. I think, and it really depends on whether it's peak season or regular season. So for peak season, and they are like small apartments, right? Like more like studios. During peak season, meaning, I don't know, like July, August, or December, January, they are usually like the peak seasons in Brazil. She's gonna make like $1,000 per month per apartment. Okay. Important to know that the property manager, they're gonna keep a substantial cut of the revenues. But if I'm not mistaken, right? Like, I mean, I don't handle that thing here at the firm. We have a person who does handle. She actually just like enters like the numbers in a spreadsheet, so our client knows what's going on with the revenues. But it's an external service. Okay, so we still act as the law firm for our client, but there is an external entity handling the short-term rental, and they charge like substantial fee. But she's getting like for these studios probably $1,000 a month per piece during peak season. Okay, that's just like an example. And during peak season, I think those units, they are the occupancy rate is 100%. And they are in São Paulo downtown, not big, but they are in a really nice building. So there you go. That's some reference for you, Moses. The Stork 2, welcome the Stork. Hi, do you think Lula will make in effect the visa for U.S. citizens in April 2025? The Stork, Have you been following up on this matter before? I'm asking that because that would be the fourth time that President Lula is going to try that. He tried 3 times unsuccessfully, okay? Nobody, not nobody, I mean, the Brazilian Congress doesn't think this is a good idea. A lot of people who have like an interest in foreign citizens coming to Brazil, they don't think that's a good idea. So they've been pushing back really hard, and President Lula tried for 3 times, and he couldn't pull this off. So I don't know if we look at the past to assess the chances of this flying now in April 2025. I would say chances are not big. Okay, chances are not great, and if we take into consideration what happened, during the 3 prior attempts by President Lula, I would say he's not going to succeed for the fourth time. All right, and just as a quick feedback on the third time, it was actually in April of this year, 2024, and they tried to make this fly, and then on April the 9th, one day before April the 10th, which was the date for the visa to come into effect, the Congress clearly said, listen, if you guys enforce this requirement, we're going to pass a bill, right? We're going to pass a bill basically undoing whatever you are trying to do and prohibiting the request for a visa from U.S. citizens, Canadian citizens, and Australian citizens, right? And then the Brazilian federal government said, you know what, like we don't want that to happen. That's going to be messy. So let's take a step back. Let's try to get traction with the Brazilian Congress, through usual, politics, right? Like if you support my request, I let you have this other thing that I don't want to give you, like the whole, exchange, right? Like between the federal government and the Congress, right? So the Brazilian federal government, the Lula administration, is trying to find enough support from the Congress to make this thing go into effect on April the 10th and 2025, right? Like, so if this is gonna work or not is gonna depend on how bad President Lula wants to have this thing live, and how much he's going to give in exchange for the Congress to support. But the general feeling is that this is not a good idea. So if President Lula wants to enforce the visa requirement, he's going to need to make a ton of concessions to the Brazilian government, and let's see what happens, right? But that's the background story for you to understand the chances of the visa requirement to go live on April the 10th, 2025. All right, Stark, there you go. Moses is asking, do you think I should buy a residential studio or a non-residential studio in Jardins? Right, residential, non-residential. Okay, so studios, they are usually residential, right? So I'm not sure if by non-residential studio, Moses, you're talking about a commercial space. I don't know. I could not tell you, Moses. Like there are people who prefer to invest in commercial space, and other people who would prefer to invest in residential space. I can tell you that in Jardins, the majority of buildings, they are actually residential buildings, so it's more traditional for Jardins. And particularly if the property is close, like to a subway station, that would be an interesting property for you to consider, Moses. Chocapic legend, welcome Chocapic. Hi, Mr. Oliveira. What is the process for a Portuguese citizen to acquire Brazilian residency? All right, Chocapic. All right, so welcome to the channel. I hope you're doing well. I was in Lisbon until, I don't know, like a week or 10 days ago. I was in Lisbon, great country. I love Portugal. I have most of my family actually lives in Portugal, and I love Portugal, okay? But going back to your question, so a Portuguese citizen has a special track for residency in Brazil. There is a treaty between the two countries making it easy for Brazilians to go to Portugal. Like when we go to Portugal, we don't need a visa. We can stay a lot of time in Portugal. And there are so many, things that are easier for Brazilians just because, of course, like Brazil was colonized by Portugal. And we also share the Portuguese language, a very important component. Culturally, there are so many common aspects, right? Like the padarias, which are not correctly translated by bakeries, right? But in terms of culinary, Brazil and Portugal are really similar in terms of the language, the culture, the behavior, so many things in common. So because of this treaty, Chocapic, there is actually a special track for Portuguese citizens in Brazil, which is basically to apply and present documents, to have like clean criminal records, and so on. So for U.S. citizens, for instance, you're going to need to have some type of basis for the residency. A U.S. citizen would need to, have such something like the retirement visa or the digital nomad, or to buy a property for 1 million reais. You, as a Portuguese, pretty much you just need to apply. It is an application full of red tape and bureaucracy, so it's not like you go online and fill out a form. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is like you don't need to meet a special requirement to secure your residency in Brazil. There is a special track for Portuguese people to apply for residency in Brazil, Chocapic. I hope that helps. All right, Chocapic legend, is it the same as a UK citizen? So not at all. Just like I said, special track for Portuguese. If you are a UK citizen, you're gonna require basis for some type of special visa or residency, such as retirement funds over $2,000, or you need to be a digital nomad, or you need to buy a property in Brazil as a UK citizen. As a Portuguese citizen, yes, you have some very special conditions to become a resident in Brazil. All right, minimum. To clarify my prior question, is commercial real estate allowed for Viper, meaning the actual land and building, not any furniture or business equipment? No, not at all, minimum. There is nothing in the regulation for the Viper for forbidding you from buying commercial real estate. All right, there is nothing like that. Now, I can tell you that for some reason, the vast majority of people buy residential real estate. So again, my concern is like if you have a contract addressing a bunch of business matters in the same contract, I would get concerned because the Brazilian immigration, they're not going to spend a ton of time trying to understand what's what. And my concern is that if you mix up a lot of business stuff in a real estate purchase agreement, you can trigger an understanding that this is not really real estate purchase. It's actually a business purchase. All right. So what I would do, I would, be very specific with the realtor saying, listen, this gotta be on the contract, on the closing, on everything. It gotta be 100% clean, a real estate transaction. And if that's the case, you should not have a problem with the property being like a building for the purpose of commercial applications, right? I hope that makes sense. All right, Minimum. Thank you, Luciano. Pretty welcome, Minimum. The Stork 2, maybe this is off topic. If you ever have the answer, please. Are there any clinics or doctors who do offer stem cells treatment as regenerative medicine and anti-aging in Brazil? If there are, please share. The Stork, that's a very interesting question. I can tell you that health clinics and this type of treatments, they are very advanced in Brazil. Maybe not as advanced as they probably are in the United States, right? But Brazil usually does a very good job, like whenever dealing with health technologies and health services. So I don't have an answer for that right now, but I think if you do a research on that front, I would expect you to have some pleasant surprises in terms of finding what you're looking for. All right, so we are passing our end time for today. William says, "Thank you, Luciano. I really enjoyed the live stream. Keep up the good work." Thank you very much, William, for the support. For all of you who are here, please like our live stream. You just need to click on the like button and join us on Wednesday for our next live stream. And you guys have a blessed rest of your Sunday. See you on Wednesday.